means to travel and grow further. And you do that first. You do the right thing first, and then success may or may not come. And he'd just that night been to an exhibition of Shepard Fairey, and for those of you, you'd remember the Hope poster during the Obama campaign. This particular artist was, a struggling artist, and made these posters. He printed 500,000, paid for them himself. His friends all said, "Why don't you, as they started to take off, why don't you start making money out of it?" And he said, "No. My intention was just to get a message out there." And Seth was really happy to say that he was at an exhibition the previous night, and some of his posters were selling for $30,000 each. And this guy certainly wasn't expecting it. And I guess all of that requires having faith, and Mitch Albom wrote in his book, which is called Have a Little Faith, it's his most recent book, a really lovely little prayer, I suppose, or anecdote. And some of you might have heard it, and I'm not sure. When a baby comes into the world, its hands are clenched because a baby, not knowing any better, wants to grab at everything, to say the whole world is mine. But when an old person dies, it's with his hands open. Why? Because he's learned the lesson. And I think, that stayed with me. And I think it's a really beautiful little way to sort of sum up that faith that you need to have in the creative pursuit of success. Lee, thanks for finding that on the internet. That's Louise Hay. And I like this. This is quite funny because Louise Hay is a phenomenon. She wrote a book called How You Can Heal Your Life about 45 years ago when she was 42. And it helped a lot of AIDS victims in San Francisco, and it went on to sell 50 million copies around the world. It's the most phenomenally successful self-help book ever. And then she's got a publishing house which publishes most of the big self-help names: Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Doreen Virtue, pretty much anyone who's made a mint out of self-help publishes through Louise. And what I found interesting is that she was like, why bother thinking you're going to find happiness from a partner or from this or that? She said, just cut straight to it. And, she said, you can't find happiness through self-help books, which is the thing I found hilarious because, at 84 she now tells us. She said, cut to the chase, because they're all saying the same thing: just get happy, just get fulfilled. And she thinks that's to be done through affirmations. She said, they just make you feel better, they just do. And look, I've always been a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to that kind of language. I'm wary. It's at arm lengths. But I did give it a go, and it was kind of interesting. What I liked, the trick that she sort of gave was when you say something like, for instance, I've said to Tim before, I'm a crap meditator. What you do is you put it into the past tense. So I used to be a crap meditator. Now, I sat there and ate breakfast with her and, of course, dropped in a whole heap of unaffirming statements about myself, and she'd give me this wry raise of the eyebrow, and I'd go, oh, okay, I used to be really bad at, blah, blah. In the end, we ended up both crying together because, she got quite emotional about it, and, another very, very authentic operator. The point being is that choose. At the end of the day, you can try all these different techniques. You need to choose life. Martha Beck, who's Oprah's life coach, she writes in her magazine, but is also very close to Oprah. She was the same thing. We sat in a restaurant in New York together, and she decided to show me how she can bend a spoon with her mind, and she did. It was unbelievable. It was a really expensive restaurant. So it was a really good spoon, is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't like one of those flimsy spoons, and I couldn't bend it. She bent it, and then I tried to bend it back, and she also used her mind to bend it back into shape again before the waiter came back. It was quite incredible, but she had a similar belief. She had a really rough life, like terrible. And she said, you know what, just go straight there. Just go straight there, get happy. And she does it through flooding herself with with kind of sensations and getting to what she calls a wordless space. And as she said, why not? Why wouldn't you? It is a choice, I suppose, in many ways. And I think, there's sort of that analogy. You can either water the roses or you can water the weeds. I think that's how it works. It's taking out the woo-woo language of where the mind goes, the energy flows, and all that kind of thing. I kind of like to think of roses and weeds. That works for me. But most of the experts I spoke to did have some kind of, I suppose, way of going. You know what? We live in a busy life now. The internet and everything just saps us of our energy. And, there's no boundaries between life and, work and home life. So we've got to do it ourselves. And I think that's something that a lot of these people sort of advocated. So, Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, he advocates, only checking email twice a day. I think he was the first person to put that out there. Although, mind you, the 2 times I emailed him, I got immediate responses. So I don't know whether it was just because I happened to grab him at his 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. email opening. I'm not sure. One of my favourites was a Chinese doctor here in Sydney, Lily Liu. I'm sure there's people in this room who've been to Lily and been told that everything's stagnant and stuck. She's got the same autoimmune disease as me, and she's got this great technique. She books herself out for an hour every day, and she goes and locks the door and lies down on the floor in the dark. An hour every day, and she just tells everyone to go away, and that's how she copes. Putting up boundaries. I think that's the really, really big, the future in terms of working out how to get happy. I've got countless examples of that, but I won't go into it. The final one. We both had the flu that day, and I think we look like it. We don't look happy together. After that photo was taken, I tap danced out of a plane wearing a Virgin airline hostess uniform with Richard Branson, with Delta Goodrem singing on the wing. It was not a highlight of my career, but I was demonstrating about doing something that you're scared of. And I told him I was scared of anything to do with performance, theatrical performance, so he made me do that. But anyway, I looked even happier after that, I can assure you. Building a muscle is, I think, something that comes up over and over again. And, there's this sense that, amazing things don't just happen overnight. It's about building up, practicing, daily practice. And this is something that all of the people that I spoke to, very few of them had overnight success. This idea of the 10,000 hours that athletes talk about, to get to that point where they're the best. This I came across over and over again, and that there's no magic bullet either. And I find this the most comforting piece of advice, especially from people who write self-help books about their magic bullet. It's great to know that they don't believe there's one either. Leonard Cohen took 7 years to write Hallelujah, and I remember reading an interview with him, and he said he's glad it took 7 years. And in fact, all of these experts I spoke to were glad it took so long for them to get to the point where they are today. Louise Hay was 40 before she published her first book, and that was on a, what do you call it, photocopier, stet, when you stetted things? Yeah, I think it was before the invention of photocopiers. I think making life better is mostly about daily practice, building up a muscle, flexing that muscle over and over again. Seth Godin practices it every day, and gave me an example. When I was talking to him, he was at an airport, and he'd done exactly what I'd done 2 days before, because I was in New York and he was coming into New York, where he was at the front of the queue. Anyone who's been to sort of the New York airport, it's just, like huge queues for the cab. And I was at the front of the queue, and I just sung out to the crowd, anyone going to wherever I was going, 57th Street or something. And, everyone looked the other way, trying to pretend they didn't know who I was. Eventually somebody stepped forward and accepted my ride. And Seth Godin did the same thing. It was quite funny. But, he said, I'm practicing I'm building the muscle of, in his case, giving out his gift, giving out art. Now, this is really I sort of sent this through to Lee this afternoon as a sort of a final note, and I think I was in a bit of a morbid space this afternoon, but there is a point behind this quote. A while ago I was asked to go and speak at a high school, and again, it was a bit of a thud of an ending, but somebody asked me, what would I like to share, my best advice to these high school students, and I said, you know what, don't ever believe that anyone out there knows what they're doing. You know, no one knows what the hell they're doing. They just kind of put up these facades to look like they are. And I guess if I've learned anything, it's that. And I also find it extremely comforting. And I also think there's a moral responsibility for those of us who do believe they're crap at life and haven't perfected things to share it. Because I think mostly humanity wants to be comforted and to know that we're all on the same page. But I'll read out the quote. It's Stephen Fry. Behind the mask of security, ease, confidence and assurance I wear so easily that its features often lift into a smirk that looks like complacency and smugness is the real condition of anxiety, self-doubt, self-disgust and fear in which much of my life is lived. I know that's a really grim note to finish on, but I strangely found it really comforting when, you know, somebody like Stephen Fry acknowledges that he struggles, you know, and every day I guess he gets up and flexes his muscle. And I think that's the best we can do. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a nice way to end things, to say that after 130 columns and interviewing all these people, that's what I come up with. But that's my truth. Anyway, thank you very much.